All right. Welcome back. Hello, Void friends and Void folk. In case you're new here, my name is Marlena Marie. I have my nice new hat. Let's pretend you didn't see the other one. And we are now on the last video of this sequence where I am basically recording them all in one day on basically the first day of March. Because I don't have the time to record YouTube videos over the course of multiple weeks because I run out of time and it makes me stressed. So we're doing it all in one day. And we're only changing a hat because you don't care about the outfits just as I don't care about the outfits. And hats matter. Hats matter. So here we are on the last week of March, I think this video is coming out. Yeah. And today we're going to talk about editing. So I wasn't originally planning on making this video today, not going to lie, because at the time of me recording this video, I'm not done. I still have proofreads that need to be done, and I still need one more round of me going through line by line, basically reading the entire book, and ensuring that it is actually all there, because if you watch my design video, you'll know that I had to do it by hand and I might have missed parts. So I'm going to make sure. Also, I'm in that process of doing it by line. I'm going to read through the entire thing and probably change some ways that things are said or on the page because of how it's actually said out loud. So that's basically 2 rounds of edits that are left, both of which are happening this month. Not today, but next weekend, I was planning on beginning the process of going the entire book through. And as I'm going through the entire book, I actually do have some of my proofreads done. My mom is doing my proofreads. So I actually have some of her notes. So I'm going to go through and do her notes as I'm reading through every line by line and making sure it's all there. And checking off pretty much every page to make sure that they're all there, right? It's going to be a long process. I'm expecting it to take at least 2 weekends, which you might be like, wow, that will be that's actually so fast. No, actually, that's very slow for me. I did the entire interior design of this book in 12 hours. I did the big line edit fix of the entire book in 7 days. So 2 weekends, which is roughly 6 days, is actually a lot of time for it. Especially since I'm not really doing heavy edits. I'm just reading it out loud to myself and then double checking that everything's safe. It should really only take 15 hours because that book shouldn't be more than 15 hours to read. But it's fine. It's okay. And so I have to do all both of those things. And actually, by the time this video comes out, and actually, chances are, by the time I'm editing this video, I'll be done. And if I'm not, but if I am, editor Marley will cut in right now and say that. So to give you guys a background of who I am, because I don't really think I've gotten into that a lot. People that are watching these videos that are my friends and family already know, but Void folk, you don't. So I've been writing since I was in the 7th grade. I finished my first completed manuscript, actually completed, top, front to back story, full story, when I was in the 7th grade. Its name is F. A Lilac. F. A Lilac and the Tale of Lady Lorraine. It was a hot 90 pages in AppleWorks. Yeah, I used AppleWorks. It wasn't good, and it's really funny because, I say that, and whenever I tell that to my friends are like, oh, how could you say that with a smile? I'm because I'm actually really proud of it. I don't cringe at my own stuff. I get a little embarrassed, don't get me wrong, but I don't I don't like the word cringe, and I don't like the idea of it, because it's kind of you're shaming a part of yourself that you were in the past, right? And yeah, a little bit of shame is important, a little bit of humiliation and humbleness is important, but you can't hate yourself for what you did in the past, because that foundation of what you built in the past allows you to be who you are today. And if you hadn't done it, and if you hadn't messed up, and if you had been perfect from the beginning, you wouldn't be where you are now. But also, no one's perfect. So you have to make mistakes, and you have to be bad, and you have to be embarrassing and not that great, and, cringe in order to become much better. This is just the way that art works. It's just the way that anything works. Practice makes perfect. Practice makes skilled, because there is no perfect. Practice even makes talent, but there is no perfect. So anyway, I started writing when I was in the 7th grade. I finished a book when I was in the 7th grade. I finished my second book when I was in the 7th grade, and I finished my third book by the time I was in the 8th grade. As a note, I finished those all within 6 months of each other. It was just that I finished the first book in like April of my 7th grade year, and then I finished my first other novel, like the third novel, August of my 8th grade year. So like it was literally like a couple of months apart. It really wasn't that far. And you're like, oh my gosh, wow, you finished a whole book when you were in a 7th. Yeah, I know that it makes a lot of people like struggle, and I know a lot of people are gonna be like, wow, you're so humble about that. No, I'm not, because my friends did not spend hours of their day reading my atrocious writing where I could not spell the word the. I could not spell the word obnoxious. I could not spell the word obscure. I could not spell the word abyss. I could not spell pretty much anything, because spelling is the bane of my existence and my one true enemy in this world. Catch me. I will throw hands with spelling. I can't do it, but I will win. I will always win. And despite how bad it was from a spelling perspective, my friends always said to me, you know what, this is a really good book. You just need an editor. Because they liked my battle sequences. My friends loved my battle sequences. My friends loved my characters. My friends loved the basic plots that I was writing, and they were basic. They were not that complicated. They were very basic. And the biggest problem was just that I couldn't spell, and that I needed a basic editor. And it wasn't even an editor for like plot or development or anything like that. They just wanted an editor so that I could spell properly, so that they could read it and it wasn't too hard for them to read. They also wanted me to use a single color of paper, because I used recycled paper from my dad's office and they were different colors. But of course, I handed these out in journals, and my friends would correct them and write notes, and my friends would be like, oh my gosh, I love Shella, she's the coolest person ever. Could you imagine a fight between Shella and like Aiden? It would be the coolest thing ever. Effa would completely win, because Effa is like, they aren't in the same universe, they aren't even in the same world. But my friends were talking about the characters, and their hype for my characters is ultimately what made me want to continue writing into the future, right? And I learned how to self-edit before I learned how to get an editor. I started working on a forum called Manga Fox. Manga Fox, in case anyone knows, was a website in the late 2000s, early 2010s, where you could read manga. And I was on the forums of those in the back, talking not about manga, but in the RP forums, where me and a bunch of other people were basically doing long-form storytelling, where you would create a character, create their profile, and then you would drop them into this world that these other people had created, and you interact with other people through your character. It was kind of like more like an MMO RPG, where you're talking with other people, and they're actually, or like a tabletop role-playing game, rather, you just aren't, you're rolling dice. You're just making decisions, and you're reacting to what other people has written on the thing, right? And a lot of these forums had very specific, strict rules. They said, no one-liners. You have to write like in character at all times. You can't be adding author notes. You can't be adding explanations. You need to just write in the character at least 3 lines, right? And man, like, you can't just write dialogue either. You had to write descriptions. And I'm not to say that all of the different forms are like that, but some of them were. And I got into one, and then I learned how to do it well, and then I was invited to another, and then I was invited to another, and I was invited to more, and people would start reaching out to me to join into their RP groups. And I learned, and then, those rules became more strict. Now you couldn't just have 3 sentences, now you had to have a full paragraph. Now you couldn't just have paragraph, you had to have paragraph breaks between your lines and your dialogue, and you had to have at least 3 paragraphs of description and not just one, and each paragraph had to have at least 5 lines. Like, there were very, very, very strict rules in these servers. And I had to learn how to edit. I couldn't, every post that I would make, right, because I would see these people that I'm idolizing. I'm 13, 14, 15 years old, and I'm looking at these other people that are writing like 10 paragraphs, 12 paragraphs, wonderful writing. You're like, oh my gosh, this is so good. I need to be as good as they are. And so I started editing my own work. I had to learn how to spell words properly. I actually got out of the source, that I got out of the dictionary, and I actually started looking at the words, and I would run that baby through a spell check. I would double check every single line before I posted it 3 times. I needed it to be read well so that other people would respond to me and they would still like me and they would still bring me into other groups and I would continue to write better. And I actually have like long-term friendships with a bunch of the girls that I met in these RP groups because of how well that I actually ended up writing. And I am the baby. So many of them are much older than me, and when they found out how young I was, they were like, and I was like, I don't have any business being on these websites at like 15 years old. But I did. And they took care of me. And they taught me how to write in a way that I think that This video is actually going to be a lot more about my writing journey than I think about editing this book specifically. And I think that has, I'm going to be honest with you about the fact that is because me editing this book has so much to do with my writing journey as a person that I can't really explain the editing of this book without explaining my process. And my process was built in 3-ring binders that I handed to my friends in math class and the girls that I RP'd with on the back end of a manga form about dragons and angels and combat scenarios where people were like, wow, you're really good at this. And I had to learn how to edit, and I learned how to get better, and I learned how to make a better story, and how to tell better characters, and how to write better battle sequences, and how to make things more appealing and more, like, everything. And then I went to college, and Manga Fox got shut down. And my friends no longer were at the same school as me, and they weren't reading my books, and they didn't have the time because everyone was so busy. And I had to write for myself. Because I wasn't getting the validation anymore. I wasn't sending it out to other people. I wasn't having other people read it. But everyone knew at this point that I was going to be a writer. My parents, my friends, everybody knew. This is what I wanted. This is what I was going to do. After class, during work, in class sometimes, I would write. I would continue to write. And I have one friend. She actually lives in India. And she and I still continued our like storytelling for a project off of Manga Fox in Google Docs, which we still have. And we do want to publish it one day and actually get it out for everyone to read. But it's not happening right now. And it was really just her. It was really just her and me writing. And when we went into Google Docs, a lot of stuff really changed for me because first off, you have the autocorrect in Google Docs, and that's a lot easier than having to double check everything 3 times. But the writing got longer, and instead of it being a couple paragraphs or having to fit a word count, because there is a word limit in back-end forms, in case anyone was wondering, you don't have that in a Google Doc. So we could write pages. We could write thousands of words. And we did. And those years between high school and where I am now were filled with a lot of me doing stuff for myself, me writing books for myself. I rewrote a lot of the books that I wrote when I was in elementary school, middle school, and high school. I wrote new ideas. I wrote new books out. I did a lot of different things. And I said to myself, I'm going to make this happen. Now, we got to roll back a little bit. When I was in the 10th grade, I sent my first query letter. I had a whole book that had, it basically was like the equivalent of the Yellow Pages, but for agents. And so basically, I went through and I highlighted all these agents, and I like looked at their things. I went up on the website online, looked them up online, tried to find as much information as I could, sent them an email, and I queried a bunch of agents for my first book, 9002. I got a response back. It was kind of cool. I don't think I ever respond. I think I did respond, and then they never got back to me. I don't really remember. I actually wonder if I didn't respond. I don't remember. That was the first time. My next time I started querying was when I was like 21. I got all the responses back. Nothing hit. I started querying again when I was 25. I did nothing. And then 27, nothing. And I learned how to write a query letter. I learned how to edit a query letter. I learned how to look at markets, what was important, how you actually do an introduction letter and what you put in a query letter and how you do all this stuff. I learned everything you possibly could about the publishing industry. I learned how why books are picked the way that they're picked, how books are done. I knew about word counts. I knew about what makes a good story, what actually does in terms of like a 3-act structure, a 5-act structure. I read how-to writing guides. I did a bunch of different tutorial like different things online and did everything. I learned how to write without ever being in a writing degree. I think that's like the most important thing. I didn't do an English degree. My major in like undergrad was business and theater / film, and with a focus in audio, not even in like writing for my film and theater degree, because I actually wanted to be a film producer so that I could produce my own movies when my books came out. Like the writing was always going to happen, but it was never like the focus. And then after I graduated and I went to Hollywood and decided I didn't want to do that anymore, and I worked at a label company, I was like, no, I don't want to do this. I was like, oh, I think I want to make the writing thing the full-time thing. And so I kind of unfocused. My parents were completely behind it and they supported me. And then I ended up getting into, I didn't really want to get into a master's program. I actually was applying for master's programs because my other friend was applying to master's programs. So she's a really fantastic writer. And she was applying, so I was applying with her, and I got into the University of Glasgow in Scotland. And I said to myself, okay, so I could go and it'd be a writing degree. And I'm going, not because I feel like I need to learn how to write, as I don't. I don't think I needed to. But I need to learn how to edit. And so I went to the school because they had the editorial and publication class, and my camera's about to die again. Give me a second. So I went to Glasgow to learn how to edit. That's essentially what I did. I wanted to learn how to self-edit my stuff. And I didn't learn that. I didn't learn how to self-edit my stuff. I realized that I knew a lot of things that a lot of students at the school didn't know because I have done so much research on things. So I ended up teaching a lot more than I did getting feedback that I actually thought was beneficial to me. In my workshop class, particularly, we did a lot of stuff for that class, and I did get some really good feedback on some things, but it was nothing that I didn't already kind of know, I guess. It was a lot of people being like, oh yeah, this is really good. You could do this in this way, or have you considered this, or have you done this? And I was like, oh yeah, cool. I'll think about that. And I realized as I was in the program that I did learn a lot, and I made a lot of really cool connections, and I actually learned how to think outside of the box for how my writing is, rather than it being very structured and very to the T of what a book needs to be. And this whole story is to get you there. So my entire writing journey, from the beginning to the end, has always been about myself. It has always been about editing to what I think works and will make other people happy, right? So like telling stories that people really liked, doing things on our RP that people liked, writing things that I wanted to make better. And then I became a writer for myself, and I wrote my own books. And when I was in my master's program, I came up with the idea for preface. And I wrote preface. I wrote preface for the first actual draft of preface while I was in Scotland. And then the second draft, and then the third draft, and then we made a long-form workshop group because I wanted to get feedback on this book because I wasn't getting the actual feedback I wanted in the short-form class, because my baby, my specialty, as I've always known, has been long-form. So I wanted somebody to read my long-form and give me feedback on it, and they did, and it was amazing feedback because it ripped the book apart, but not in a mean way, but like basically was like, hey, these are all the things you need to fix. This is actually, it gave me insight into the book in a way that was important to me, because I finally was able to get someone that read the entire book and were able to read it as a writer and as an editor, or being trained as an editor, to be able to tell me how to fix things and be like, hey, I don't know exactly what this is, but this is a problem you need to address, and look about how to do it. And then with my Glaswegian writing degree, that was very much so focused on do what you want, do it well. And like push the limits. Like why does your text need to be so limited? Why does your POV need to be so limited? Why are you doing things the way that you're doing? Why don't you expand more with poetry in the combination of like text? Like break form a little bit more. Our program was very experimental. It's the best way to put it, right? We were very experimental. We weren't like the Iowas or the other master's programs that are very much so like they teach you a very specific style and they teach you how to write it. Glasgow is all about write in your style, but push it. Push it a little bit more. Try something that's a little different. Try something that's a little new. Don't care so much about form. Care more about the art for the sake of art rather than the sake of it being the proper story that you're telling. So now, I, as a person who knows how a book sells, why books sell that way, what makes a good story, what a 3-act structure is, how you actually format a 3-act structure. I don't do any outlining, but I know all of this because I've done I've done so much research and I've read so many books and I've actually looked at all these things. And can I say that I have them all memorized? No, because ultimately at the end of the day, writing advice is you take what you like and you leave what you don't. My workshop group saw draft 4 of Preface, so 4 drafts I had gone through before I decided to get the workshop group. So there were 4 drafts, like 3 drafts before it that they never saw. And they were not great, but in my writing process, I write out a story and then I realize what the story is about and then I go back and I rewrite the entire story and then I do it a 3rd time. And the reason for that is because the first time is me just getting the idea out. It's not really a story. The second time is me actually telling the story, and then the 3rd time is me being like, okay, let me tell that story better. So the 4th draft, after doing that, was the one that they saw. And they gave me notes. I rewrote it. 5, they saw 6, because I took basically for that. Whenever there's anything that I change, I kind of make it a new draft. So like draft 5 was me taking all of their notes and basically incorporating it, and then draft 6 was me rewriting it again, not really rewriting it, but like basically in top to bottom with all of those notes in place and like solidifying it, making sure that everything was in line, making sure that everything was actually like flowing properly and that it actually was a lot more stabilized, right? Like I messed up the foundation with draft 5, is the best way to put it. And I put all these new edits in and I did all these changes and it was across the board and it wasn't even and I wasn't doing it from top to bottom. I was just doing it wherever it needed to be done, right, for all the edits that they gave me. And then I fixed the big overarching error stuff and I needed to do it again, top to bottom, making sure I hit all of those big points, but also making sure that the story was still stable. And that's draft 6. They saw draft 6, they said, okay, here's some more things that you need to fix. 7, 8, 9 is what I handed to my editor. No, 8 is what I handed to my editor, or 9. One of the two. And I said to myself when my workshop group was looking at it, the first time I looked at it, I was like, oh, this is cool. I needed this stuff. My second time, I was like, okay, cool. Now that I have it, the book is basically done, I think. Maybe. I need to give it to an actual developmental editor and double check.
So I'm really upset, actually. I was supposed to have a meeting with my top choice editor that I've been like watching for years now on social media for self-publishing. And I was in the meeting waiting for her, and she said, hey, can we push the meeting back to 2:45? Now I'm in the West Coast, so when I saw 2:45, I was like, oh, so 2:45 like in the afternoon, like I can do that. That's in like 4 hours, but I can make that happen. She meant like 15 minutes later. So I basically like ghosted this person. I didn't intend to, like it wasn't at all. I just thought 2:45. So I checked my email at like 2 o'clock looking for the next link, and I have 2 emails that are basically being like, are you okay? Like, is everything okay? And that's nice, that's awesome. And I was like, oh my God, I like messed up. I thought you meant like in 4 hours, not in 15 minutes. So that's a little frustrating. I'm still waiting to get a response back from that. Hopefully this will end up being good, but we'll see, because that's a terrible first impression, and that was not my intention at all. So I don't know what to do, but I guess I can only wait. Okay, so a lot has happened since I last talked to you. Right. Hey, that is wrong. You know what? We're gonna do this thing. All right. So a lot has happened. Okay, so a lot has happened since I last talked to you. Last video was basically me crying, but it's fine. That got rescheduled. Everything is good. We are on our way. I got the contract from the editor today. I realized after getting the contract for the editor that in my original budget video, I completely messed up. Like I put the right amount of money of what I was expecting the developmental edit to cost, but I didn't put in the budget how much I expected proofreading or line edits to cost. Like I just completely skimmed over that. Like the money that I'm going to be paying for this editor is exactly the amount that I thought I was going to have to pay, but it doesn't include line edits or proofread because I knew that it wasn't going to include line edits or proofread, but in my budget video, I didn't add that cost in. So anyway, that video is wrong. I still need to figure out what I'm going to do for line edits. Proofread, though, that is going to be good. I'll just probably have my friend do it, or I'll do it, or I'll run it through some, like, word check, because that'll be fine. That's, like, commas and periods. If there's, like, bigger structural or bigger, like, issues, that's on me and my, like, basic editing. That's not on, that's not on, the actual, that's just not on the editor. That's on me. So I am excited. It is the cost that I expected. It is a lot of money. But I expected that because it's 176,000 words, and that is a lot. That is a lot of money. So, I mean, it's a lot of words, so of course it's a lot of money. And, yeah, so it'll be fine. And, yeah, I'm excited. See how this goes. Next video will probably be me sending in the manuscript. Or, yeah, probably me sending in the manuscript.
My hope was when I sent it to the developmental editor that the developmental editor would be like, okay, there's some things that are still a little iffy. The word count is still really high and extreme. Let's try to cut these down, try to fix it and trim it and do all these things, right? And to drop it down to at least 150. Because it was an epic fantasy, but I knew it wasn't going to be that big. I didn't want it to be more than 150. The word count that I gave the editor was 173, which totaled out about 20,000 K. Because 173 is a lot of words for a person to be doing a developmental edit on. And I got my notes back. And I realized when I was reading the developmental edit that the editor didn't know what I was trying to do. And this is not to say that she's a bad editor, because she's not. She's a fantastic editor. She gave a lot of really good feedback and a lot of really good notes. And when we had our developmental meeting a couple weeks after I got my letter, we went over a lot of different things and like, and I'll talk about that in a hot second. But like, I realized looking at this that something that I thought was like the key and pivotal thing in the novel was not hitting. She didn't understand it, and she actually recommended cutting it, like completely. She said that she didn't understand the purpose of it, and it didn't matter. And what that was the group dance. Now, when you read the book, you'll understand, but the group dance is very significant in my mind. It was always a significant part of my mind because it's the showcasing that the group comes together finally, that this group of people come together. I can't give a lot of information without talking about the book, but she said it didn't matter. She didn't understand why I was there. It just seemed to slow things down, and she was like, all of this preparation for it doesn't really matter. She also recommended cutting some of the characters. And my whole thing was if I cut the characters, then if I cut the characters, I also have to cut the gods, because there's 6 gods and there's 6 main like friends, right? So if I cut two of these have to go because they were the same. So the 2 big things in this book, that these 2 things are supposed to be the same, and that the group dance is the pivotal like moment of everything coming together, both of those she recommended cutting, and I realized in that moment that, not that I had failed, but that the book wasn't ready. The book hadn't hit what I needed it to hit, and that was that community is the most important thing in the entire book, right? The friends, the community, all of it is the most important thing. Not the person saving the world, not any of that, not the dances themselves. It is the community saves the world, right? Together. And she recommended cutting it. She recommended cutting characters. I was like, wow, I'm not doing that. Not because it was bad advice, but because as her skill, like, she's trained in a very specific type of editorial style. And I looked at her notes and I said, she's correct if I was writing a typical fantasy novel. She's right. If I was writing this book in a more traditional stance, it would have been the correct move. It would have been the correct play. All of the books that I'm trying to comp this novel to, that is correct. All of the ways that, like, you know, traditional, like, books tell you about characters and tell you about, like, the plot and tell you about specific things, she's right. But my masters had basically made it so that I wasn't writing like that necessarily anymore. Not to say that I'm never going to, but I wasn't, not this project. This project certainly wasn't. This project was now completely done from top to bottom in my master's program. And one of the things I was thinking before I actually got her editorial letter back was that I need to rewrite this book from top to bottom anyway, because I need to make the chapters reference the dances that are in the book. Because there's 27 dances, and there's only 27 like dances in the book, like chapters, but they're called dances, right? There's 27 of them.
I'm cutting in real quick as I'm editing this, and I promise once the book is out, I will go through and talk about why I made all the choices, from the spacing and the naming of things and why everything is important, because everything was a decision and everything is important, and I don't know how much more I can reinforce that.
Plus 5 interludes. But like that's the interludes were added because my workshop group was like, hey, we need to put the world building a little bit more in the front. So I was like, okay, I'll separate it with interludes throughout the entire book, so like it breaks it up, the tension. And so I had 5 interludes and then there's 27 dances, and I was like, wow, I have 5 interludes and there's 27 dances. And the way that the dances are actually set up in the world is that you have 27 dances, and in between, like, the first 6, the second 6, the third 6, the fourth 6, and the last 3, there is a MC that comes out and talks between each person, introducing the dances. And I was like, that's it. The interludes introduce the dances, the next 6, and then it introduces the next 6, and then introduces the next 6. So I need to make sure that the interludes are built like the MC talking about what the section's going to be about, quote unquote. It's not really exactly like that, but it's like introduces the concept of what's coming forward. And then the next 6 dances are about that concept. And then I was like, I need to make the dances. I need to break this book up and make it like the dances. So you have this interlude 6, interlude 6. The first 7 technically are appreciation, and then knowledge, and then knowledge, and then appreciation, and then powers, and then understanding, and then worship. Which is how the set of 27 dances are set up. This is all the world building. I was like, the world building needs to actually be on the page in the form of the way that the chapters are set up. And I said to her, and so I got my notes back, and I saw that she was like, oh yeah, no, the group dance needs, it's not that it shouldn't be there, but that, like, you know, there was a lot of emotion repeating, which I didn't actually know about that term until she mentioned it. And when she mentioned it, I was like, oh, I know exactly what she's talking about. And that made me a much better writer, because just knowing about emotion repeating and like making sure that your book is never doing that and it's like always progressing forward is actually something that I learned, and then I taught my workshop group, and now they look out for it in my stuff anyway, which is really cool. And like she was like, oh yeah, so like the group dance doesn't really have the power. And then I talked to her and I was like, hey, like it needs to be there. And she's like, okay, well, how can you do it in a way that allows you to keep the group dance and still have the power of the end? Because of where it was listed and where it was happening, it was kind of taking away some of the power from the end, and she didn't want that happening because the ending was so important. And I said, in my mind, I was like, the ending only works if it's there. So when I went back for the next draft, one of the biggest things that I had to think about was, how am I going to rewrite this entire thing so that that matters? And then I said to myself, I'm self-publishing this anyway, so screw it. This book was originally this word count when I handed it to the editor. The book that you will be getting when it actually goes live on April 29th is this word count. That's basically 100,000 words more. And I know that that's crazy. I know that that's the absolute opposite of what she told me, which is to cut and to trim and to make it more tight and concise, and I didn't do that. Instead, I got more verbose. And I did that for the group dance. I did it for the group dance, honestly. I did it for the group dance. I did it for the silence. I did it for the themes and the thematics. I looked at my program for my master's program, and I said, okay, bet. Let's do it on a long form. I want this book to be about community. I want this book to be about the symbolism and the themes. And I'm not writing this for anybody else at this point. So I'm going to do it the way that I want to do it. And the way that I want to do it is I want to make sure that these characters in the group dance matters. So I had to add more of the group dance. I had to add more of the characters. I had to add more of their development. I had to add more of making those characters matter. I had to link the characters better to the gods so that you understood that the gods and the main friends were the same. I had to, not exactly the same, but like they're related to each other. Without one, you can't have the other. I needed to have an emotional arc that actually follows the dances. So you start with knowledge where you learn pretty much everything that's going wrong. You get an appreciation, you get the powers as everything comes together, you get the understanding of when everyone finds out more about our main character, and then you finally get the ending. So the book is basically my main character. He is like, I need to save the world, blah, 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 right? The first 6 chapters. And then he comes back home after being away for 12. I'll give you the premise of this book later. And then the next 6 chapters are him coming together with all of his friends, and they're all like kind of not on the same page anymore. And then the next 6 chapters are finally they're all on the same page, and they're all coming together, and everything's going great, and everyone's going happily. And then it all breaks down when they all find out that he's going to die at the end of the book if they can't figure out a way to save him. And that's what the group dance is for. Because the only reason he survives is because they're all with him, and they're all going to be there with him as he saves the world. And I needed, could I have done that in less words? Probably. But this is an epic fantasy, and I went full into the epic fantasy at that point. And I also took another thing that we talked about in that meeting with me and my editor was that she didn't think the interludes were working. She said to me, I actually don't think that they're working. I don't think you need them. I think you could just put the world building in the regular part of the book, which is so fascinating to me because my workshop group had me take out all that world building because it wasn't working in the book. And I said to myself, okay, so the world building isn't working. The interludes aren't working. But now I know that I want this book split up in the way that actually mirrors the dances, so the interludes have to stay. And I said to her, okay, I've been thinking about this, because I had been thinking about it. I said, what if I write the interludes from a different POV? And she said, wow, that gave me chills, and usually when that happens, I know that that's the correct answer. And I said, yeah, it's the correct answer. And so when you get the book, you'll see that the interludes are a different POV than the main book. They're both brother characters, and we'll get into that. I was like, okay, cool. So interludes are going to be completely different. They're going to serve a different purpose now. Instead of them being like a world building on the world building on examples and concepts and stuff like that so you can learn more, they're going to present the idea of what is happening next. So knowledge interlude, interlude 1 introduces the idea of knowledge. You won't really understand that until you've gotten more into the book, but basically it's the moment that everything breaks down and the main character has to run for the rest of the book, right? For 12 years. The incident where that happens is the first interlude. And it gives you the knowledge of what's going to happen to come, right? It's also a mirror of something else that happened and some other things, and you'll get it later on. But then interlude 2 is the introduction to appreciation. So in this interlude, you get basically what my friends call the marriage ceremony, where you get an appreciation of different concepts in the book and like the relationships that you're going to actually get, like as when they were kids versus where they're adults. Then 3 is powers, which is when the interlude main character basically wins using abilities through dance that no one else thought he should be able to do. And then 4 is understanding, which is my workshop group's favorite of the interludes. And honestly, it was the only interlude that I knew I was going to do when I actually talked to my editor that day in June, because it was the one that was in my head, and I knew that it had to be written. I knew that it had to be written, and it's the moment where basically, don't want to give you spoilers, but the interlude POV and his best friend have a heart to heart where they understand each other on a fundamental level, and it changes their lives forever. And the 4th part, which is understanding, basically is when all of the other characters and all the main character's friends all come together to have an understanding of what the main character is going through. And then 5 is worship, where we have the main character and him going through a process of basically like worshiping, and what that means and what it costs. And it's not exactly a 1-to-1. It's not exactly perfect. I'm not going to say that it is, and I'm not going to be over here like flipping my hair and being like, it's the most amazing thing ever. It's not. It's not even like 100% a like set up for each thing, but it is supposed to help mirror it. And then obviously the last 3 chapters, which are worship. And so I did that. She loved that idea. I don't know if she's going to love the rest of the things that I did, but it's okay. And one of the last things that I did was she recommended writing the dances. She said that one of the things that she really loved about how the book was that how intricate and important the dance was to the book itself. And she gave me all these wonderful titles of people to read and to look into and to learn how to describe dance on the page. And I was like, that's cool, but I'm not going to do that. And this is like one of the most important things that I want any young writer or any person to know, that there are times where you really should listen to your editors and you really should listen and do what they say and actually like learn how to tell a story well, right? You need to learn how to actually do a pacing, and you need to learn how to do plotting, and you need to learn how to do your characters, and you need to learn how to do something. But sometimes, you're the only one that knows how to tell the story that you want to tell. And I knew that describing the dances on the page was not the move. Not because it wouldn't be pretty, and not because it wouldn't be like perfect, and not because I don't need to describe all of them. I did put in some descriptions and some things, but because of silence. Now, I keep mentioning this word, and that's because that is the most important word. If I had to take one word from anything, and that one word is the most important word for the book, it's the word silence. Silence. And for a book that is this many words, silence is a very interesting concept, isn't it? Because what does that mean? What does that mean when you have this many words? What that means is dance. And I decided, as I think I talked to my design book, that I have the pages dance. So there's parts where the text is broken up and it moves across the page. Like you read it like this. Like it's, I can't explain it other than like showing you. And like, that's an example. I designed it so that it begins with a single sentence and ends with a sentence because it creates a tempo. I formatted the chapters as if to practice the dances. I did everything in the book from the way that it is about dance and tempo and movement with having it left aligned and having it right aligned and having different words and having different things and like why specific words are there, how specific things are said, how specific lines are given, all to create the understanding of dance without actually having dance on the page and describing it. Because I didn't think personally, and I might be wrong, there's probably going to be people that would rather have the dance actually described so that they can have a better idea of it visually. But for me, when I was writing it, I didn't think that the actual physicality of the dance was so important so much as the meaning behind the dance. And that's kind of what the entire purpose of the 27 dances were from like as they're described, is that the message of the dances as the dancer is dancing them is more important than the actual moves. And I say this so many times throughout the entire book. So for me, it was more about the messages and the themes rather than describing the actual physicality of the person sweating and the person flipping the fans and actually snapping them open and the fabric going and like what it actually looks like, because that is all in your mind, more tossing around with those themes and symbols rather than it being an actual physical written word of this is exactly what it looks like. Because I don't want to tell you what it exactly looks like. I want you to figure that out, and I want you as the reader to have your own interpretation of it, because that's Incarnate Dreams. And I wanted the people that were reading it, like that's Incarnate Dreams, that is Silence. So I added white space on the page. I added I moved the text around and broke up sentences that were originally one line, and I made them 5, and I made the text dance. Most people say that they make the text sing. I made my text dance so that I didn't have to describe the dances. And I think that it did really well, and I actually think that works better. It took up a lot of pages, so there's a lot of white space, and I actually made a choice to have a lot of white space in this book. And I wouldn't have done that. I would have never done that if it wasn't for my master's degree. I would have never actually even thought about making the text dance the way that I did if it wasn't for my editorial letter that I got. Because I just didn't think about it. I didn't think about it as an option. And then when I got my editorial letter, I was like, why not? I'm already going to have to go make this book bigger and change it anyway. Why not? Why not? So then I got that back. I gave my workshop group draft 10. And then my friends gave me their edits back. One of my friends gave me very nice line edits for the end half. And then I went through and I line edited the entire book. Now, do I think that I'm the best at that? No. I currently work as an editor for a magazine called Exhibit City News, and I am the editor at the magazine, so I read all this stuff and I edit all the stuff, but most of that's copy editing, and most of that is basic line editing or basic rewriting, if necessary. It's not line editing in the way that fiction line editing is, where you have to look at all your filler words and cut them out, and rewrite a sentence so that it actually makes sense, or rewrite whatever so it actually makes sense, or making things active versus passive, making things... And can I say that I did it the best? No. Did I have the money to get a line editor? Also, no, because I spent like $20,000 on that original developmental editor. And like, do I think that was a lot of money to spend? Yes. Do I also know the word count was really high? Also, yes. Do I think that I would have done a line editor if I didn't? Well, I got my feedback notes in October. I didn't actually work on them until January because I was waiting for somebody else to give me the notes back, and she never did. Never. So I was kind of waiting for 3 months for those, and if I had just done the edits back in October, I think I would have gotten a line editor in December and then had those edits back in February and then went through them. But I didn't, so I had to do it all on my own. Does that mean that it's going to be the most best edited book ever? Probably not. Do I trust my own self-editing pretty well? Yeah, I do. Because I learned how to do that on, back-end forms on websites at the age of 15. And even if it's not perfect, and even if there's some sentences that aren't exactly completely great, it's okay. Because it's not meant to be perfect. It's just meant to be practiced. And I think ultimately, at the end of the day, this whole entire video about editing, I don't really talk a lot about editing itself. If you want to learn more about editing itself, let me know. I guess I can go into more of the details of my editorial letter. I can go more into the details of how you find your filler words, how you rewrite your sentences with filler words, what you do in order to do that. When you have 200,000 words, you are going to have a lot of repeating words, and what that means, and why you pick specific words to have them repeat if you're going to have them actually mean something. And why I made choices that I did across the page will be really fun when I actually can show you when the book's out. But again, my mom's proofreading it because she's kind and she loves me, and if anyone can proofread. My mom's proofread pretty much everything that I've ever turned into my life up until I went into my master's program, and then it became my friend Kate. And my friend Kate did the line edits for the second half of this book. So, like, I trust my mom with my writing probably more than I would trust anybody else, because my mom got me into college with my writing essays. My mom got me into my master's program. She read through all of my stuff for that. My mom read through most of my assignments for my master's program before I had Kate doing it. And so I'm just saying, if my mom could get me A's in these classes by reading through and giving me corrections, then she can read and edit my book. That's all I'm going to say. She might not actually be completely skilled at it. She might actually just be a teacher. She might not actually have the accreditations that you need to have as like an actual editor. But I wouldn't trust anyone with my writing more than my mom. I wouldn't. And so I'm waiting on this proofreads, waiting on the last bit. I am interested to see how this goes. This video was a lot more about me, I guess, than it was about the editing of this book specifically. And I think I need to explain why. Now, you might have gotten to this part of the video and you're like, oh, wait, it's not done yet. Yeah, I'm sorry. Why? Why did I talk about myself? Why did I talk about my editorial process? And why did I talk about everything about my writing and my journey of a writer to talk about the editing of this book? Why? Because this book is for me. And it's for you. Now, it's mostly for me, but it also can be for you. I wrote this book when I first did as a traditional epic fantasy adventure novel. And it's become something that I can't really describe. I've used the word epistolary fiction because it uses words in a way that you don't usually use words, like across the page, and like uses white space and stuff like that. But it's also kind of like poetry then. I would call it solar punk and an epic fantasy because of the word count. But it's not high fantasy, it's like new future fantasy. So solar punk epic. But it's also heavily dependent on the themes and the symbols that I'm using. Like, I throw in a symbol, throw in a theme, it is there, and it is going to be harped on. So that's really like literary fiction. So the best term I have is art house, which is actually a film term, because art house is the film term for films that are created by creators who are very dedicated to a very specific thing that they're trying to do. And that's preface. Preface for me is not the book I ever thought was going to be my first book. I actually thought that 9002 was going to be my first book. Like, even until like I actually wrote this book and I decided to go forward with it, I thought 9002 was going to be my first book, because 9002 fits the formula. 9002 is epic space fantasy fighting action sequences, fantasy power, cool novel, right? It fits. I thought it might be Skeletora, because that also fits. YA fantasy girl with magic powers, like, does things. I thought it might be Effa, but then I was like, maybe not, because that's gonna be a lot longer. I thought it could be Night of Fright, which I wrote originally in the 10th grade, and I've rewritten since then, because it's also still follows in that same like vein. But it's gonna be preface. It is the preface of a worthy fable. And preface is my thesis statement. It is the abstract for the rest of my career. The preface of a worthy fable tells you, as a reader, that this is the kind of career I want. It is not a career of perfection. It's not a career of epic proportions. Not really. It's a career where greatness is achieved because you are great. Not because people tell you you're great, but because you've put in the effort and you've put in the time. And for some people, not all people, they will think that that is great. It is a career of community where I'm going to support my friends, and I'm going to support new friends that come along, and I'm going to continuously uplift them, and I'm going to continuously promote their stuff as well. It is a career in which I don't care. I have always cared. But at this point, I realize that the only person that can care is me. And the person that cares the most is me. And that I am the only one that is ever going to have to deal with how bad or good a book is. Because you can put it down. You can throw it away. You can leave a bad review. I'm the only one that's going to have to reread it. I'm the only person that's going to have to live with that. And preface of A Worthy Fable. It did not start off this way. It didn't start off as a whole dissertation on what it means to be an artist and what it means to create and what it means to be great. But it became that. And I think that this book holds all the themes that you'll ever find in all my novels. I think that this book holds all of the hopes that you'll ever find in all of my novels. I think that this book is me. And so I give it to you, whether you like it or whether you don't. And that is why I had to talk about myself before I talked about the editing, because I could have edited this book 1,000 different ways. I could have done it in the standard process. I could have rewritten it so that it fit into a normal fantasy genre. But this book is accumulation of every late night that I spent online RPing and telling stories with other people from across the globe. It is accumulation of the hours that I put into my film school and my English classes and my creative writing masters. It is accumulation of every technique I've ever learned, every skill I've ever gotten, every type of writing that I've ever done, every experimentation that I've ever done in writing. It is a accumulation of what it means for me to be a writer. And whether or not anyone ever reads anything else by me, whether or not they hate everything else by me, whether or not they hate this, I won't. Because I think that every book that you put forward is a better sense of who you are as a writer. And who I am as a writer right now is no better encompassed than by preface. And while the book is called The Preface of a Worthy Fable because it does actually matter to the book itself, I think that there's no better title to start as the prologue to the story of my life than this one. So that's why my writing journey matters so much for this book, for its editing, because I did it to edit it the way that I want it to be. I will talk more about this book, more about the themes, more about what it is, more about the plot, more about everything about it in another future video as we get closer to the actual deadline. Well, not deadline, but like the release date. And I also plan to talk about like what writing means to me, and what it is, as we continue going forward. I didn't necessarily mean for this video to be so emotional. I really didn't. I just kind of wanted to give you an understanding of who I was and where I was coming from and why I made the choices that I did in this like book, and why it took me so long to do the editing of this book, because it's hard. It's really hard. And while I don't think that this is my baby, because my baby is Ethel Lilac, I think that this book is me. And that's why it was so hard to make this video. It was so hard to do all the editing. That's why it took so long. But that's okay. And if you've gone this far, thank you. I hope throughout the rest of this, I threw in the clips that of me recording myself through the editorial process at different times. Or I didn't, and I will now. But if you've made it this far and you're continuously watching me on this journey and you're here with me as I talk about different things, thank you. I really wanted this video to be a video of me showing you the edits and me showing you how to do it, and maybe one day I'll actually do that. But for right now, that's not what this video is. Maybe after it's out, but not right now. And I can go into like the actual specific choices that I made on specific pages if that is something that people care about, but only after it's out. Because I feel like if I go into it now, you're going to have expectations outside of the ones that I want you to have. And the ones that I want you to have going into this book is that the only person that's going to make this book happy is me. I'm sorry. It's not very commercial of me to say that. It's actually the antithesis of commercialism for me to say that. And I'm still putting it out to the world to share anyway. But that's okay. That's the expectation you need to go into it with. Because I'm going to hype the book up. I'm going to talk about how cool it is and everything about it. And you just need to know that the only person that's really going to be satisfied by it is me. And my mom. But my mom loves everything I do. So you can take her word with a grain of salt. So I really don't know what else to say. I thought it was going to have some really cool, epic ending, but I don't. So maybe I'll cut it earlier. Probably will cut it earlier. Or I'll end it here. Dreams exist. And when you embody them fully, when you let them exist in who you are fully, you can become everything. But this book is not meant for you. Oh no. I really don't know what else to say, because I think I've said it all at this point, and I can keep rambling, and I feel like I'm going to cut it earlier or do whatever I want. But at this point, I just don't know. And there's a little bit of fear there still. A little bit of fear that after coming this far and me being like, no, I don't care anymore, that I do still care. I really do. And I'm still working through that. And I know there's going to be other videos as I talk about all these other things that I hope you care about. But I'm sitting here and I'm realizing that this is it. My book's coming out on April 29th. And finally, that kid in the 7th grade is going to have a book out. And that kid in the 7th grade is, I don't know if I would have been happy with this book, because I probably would have wanted FA or 9002 or anything else. But I do know that if I was that kid still, because I am, that I would think that this is the coolest thing ever. Because at the end of the day, I'm doing this book that I want to write, and that was always the only thing that ever mattered. So, if you've gotten this far, and you're here to be with me on this journey through the rest, I will see you next week with a different outfit, because it'll be a different recording. And I don't know what the future holds. I really don't. I don't know what the future holds. Really don't. I don't know what's going to happen next week. I do know I'll be with a different outfit, but if you've made it this far, thank you for coming. Thank you for listening to me ramble for like literally basically 40, 50 minutes, almost an hour about my process and my journey, and not even going into the editing itself. And I hope you stick with me. I hope you like the book when it comes out. And I hope that you know that this is just the beginning. It is always just the beginning. So, For those of you that know me, and those of you that know me, to the Void friends in the audience, and the Void folk who
To
are
my
just
Void
passing
friends,
by, I
and
do
my
know
Void folk.
my name is Marlena Marie.
Thank you
Is
for
I
being
am
here.
you. I will see you.
And I will see
next
you
time. Next time. Until then, bye-bye. Honestly, that video almost made me cry, and if we're gonna be like completely honest about it, like I don't even know how to like actually process it right now. Like I almost started sobbing. I don't think that you understand. Some of my viewfinders like right here, but I almost started sobbing because I was just like, wow, this is about to become a lot more like personable than I thought I wanted it to be, and that's not happening. That's not happening until I do the video about either the book itself, which I don't want it to be, but it's gonna be about the video that comes out on April 25th. The video that comes out on April 25th. That's the one that I'm gonna cry in. That's the one that I wanna cry in. I don't care if you guys cry. I'm crying because that's the book. Well, that's the video where I'm gonna talk about my launch party, and I'm gonna talk about everything that I've done and what this means to me. So next video should be about my pen name and the extended universe, as well as preface as a general title. And then the video after that, I think, is going to be about setting everything up online. So like pre-orders and my marketing plan and how everything went with that. And then the last video, because I think we only have 3 Fridays before. We have 4. I'll find out what the other one is. But the last one is basically going to just be about me being like, whoa. And I'm using my camera audio for this instead of my phone audio because I kind of decided to do this last minute. But, yeah. So, didn't cry. 25th, though.